Today I'm on location. I'm here in Spokane, Washington at Moonwild Studios and have the honor of talking to Steph Souvé. Steph has been a person that I've seen in this realm quite a bit over the past few years, and has been a person I've been really excited to talk to. Just through our conversations over the years, finding out what she does and how she approaches healing and her own healing journey is very inspiring. So today I'm honored to be in Steph's studio to talk with her about her journey and how she got to the point of having this space that we're in. We talk about the courage of change, something I think we all kind of struggle with at some point in our lives, the imposter syndrome. We move through the idea of looking at a human through the 8 pillars, which is something that Stephanie does with her clients. And then one of my favorite quotes that came from this conversation is, be brave enough to be who you are, because that's why you're here. So love this conversation with Stephanie. Honored to take this time. Hope you get something out of it. We'll see you on the other side. But first, this message. No matter how much we prepare, the holidays tend to stress us out. So this year, take a moment to reset and recenter with a grounding retreat in Costa Rica. Join Jeff Hawkins, Steve Wimmer, Cameron Nagashima, and myself, Adam Reel, for a 1-week immersive yoga retreat at Blue Osa Resort, backed up to miles of pristine beach. Every day you'll have an option to experience yoga, meditation, relaxation, self-discovery, adventures, or your own personal free time. This is a time to build your peaceful practices before you need them. Take this time for yourself. Visit GarudaWellness.com for details. We have pricing options available, and if you pay in full by July 1st, you receive a 20% discount. Through the experiences offered, there's a lot of different ways to build your practice and approach this retreat. Take time to create space for yourself so you can hold space for others. Reset and recenter. Visit GarudaWellness.com for more information. That's Garuda, Garuda, Wellness, WELLNESS.com. GarudaWellness.com. And now an uninterrupted podcast with Stephanie Souvé. All right, welcome back to our show. Today I'm talking with Steph Sauvé. Steph is located in Spokane, and we've met each other many times now. You've come to sound baths. We've had many beautiful conversations, chatted with your husband, Matt. And I'm really excited to have this opportunity. One, to be in your space. I don't get to go on location too often. So on location is really dope. And you have this amazing, just lounge, Reiki energy, just rolling bed over here. It's amazing. And so I'm in Wild Moon Studios in Spokane, where Steph is located at. And I'm so excited because we've had so many cool ancillary conversations before or after events, just talking, about after energy work, or, we're all cracked open, it's like a post yoga class kind of ideas, where the guards are down and the conversations are just going out, and it's just beautiful. And so, I've kind of gotten to know you a little bit through that. But I'm just really excited to be here and to be able to talk with you. You approach energy work in a very beautiful way. It seems like you're weaving. I love how your plant's just dancing right now. I love
that particular plant, it does dance quite a bit. When I have people in here, it wants to be a part of what we're doing.
Please,
and
it's a little prayer plant. Dance your heart out, man. I love that.
Yeah.
But and this is kind of, we were talking about this before we hit record. But when we can approach our life in the authentic way that makes sense to us, there's a magic that happens with that. And when you are holding space for somebody in a healing realm, right? So you're an energy worker. We'll get into that in a second. But when you can kind of interweave your authenticity of you into the energy work that you do, I think it adds another layer of specialness to it, because the idea of everybody's unique, but nobody's special, right? You're very unique in the way that you are, right? And I'm saying me, everybody in this world. And when we can lean into that and identify with some of those oddities, if you will, and understand that's a layer of just who you are, and that's a beautiful thing, right? We can really deepen the way that we hold space and we share space, and we combine this kind of idea of healing. So thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Adam, for having me. I loved your idea of why not wait until we can be in person?
Oh, yeah.
And you can come and sit with me in my sanctuary of Moonwild Studio, and just, yeah, we can connect in person, which is really special. So thank you for having me. And I've loved our conversations. I was just joking around with Hannah this morning about how when we just did our original connection call to talk about going on to the podcast, at the end of talking for over an hour, it was like, oh, that could have been the podcast.
It's funny. I was just talking to a friend about that's wanting to start a podcast, and they were asking, should I do pre-calls, to make sure that we have good chemistry and all this stuff. And I'm like, you can, but you run the risk of getting your podcast out in the pre-call. Not to say you can't have another beautiful conversation, but there's something to that sporadicness. In the few that I have done with the pre-calls, it's like, wow, I really just need to record these and find a way to maybe edit some of the topic matter into the actual conversations we have, because it's some good shit in there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm so grateful. Thanks for having me. And it's so fun to have you here in the space. This studio really is a dream come true for me. I used to coach and do my sessions online, on Zoom or on Facebook groups, and, just online on the computer screen. And then it morphed into, I had a room in my house that I turned into my healing studio and my session room, and that was really special for the reason that my kitties could be a part of it.
Cats, you love energy work.
And man, I called them my little intern healers, and they would sometimes come into the sessions and interact with the clients in such a beautiful way, with the client's permission, of course.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Only the cat lovers, which all of my clients happen to be so far, which is amazing.
It makes sense. The right clients are going to find the right person to take care of them,
Yeah, and so that was a really beautiful phase, but I really felt I had this vision of, I want to take it out of my home and I want it to be its own thing. I want the space to hold not just my clients, but me in a different way, where when I walk into there, it feels like, okay.
Yeah. So I've recently made that similar change of going from the house to an office. Now, for you, when you made that change or finally made the decision to make the change, did you feel like you were holding yourself back for some reason, like imposter syndrome? I'm not trying to throw, I'm basically
leading up
regurgitating
to it before
myself.
It happened.
Yeah, totally. It's no one will go over to your office. Your house is fine. You don't need to pay rent. All that stuff starts to go through my head. I just wanted to, is that something you experienced in your own kind of way?
I'm just reflecting back to how it did feel. It was one of those things where it was something that I was manifesting in the ethereal future. Sometime in the magical future where all of my dreams live is this space I'm going to open.
Okay.
And then it moved really quickly once the opportunity was there, and I kind of didn't have time to overthink it. It was like the opportunity arose. The space opened up in the building. My husband found out about it because he knows the building owner. And he used to have, when he first started with his business, he had a room 2 doors down from me on the same floor.
All right.
In the same building. And so he said, he came home one day and was like, oh, I was talking to Carlos, who's the building owner. And he has a few open suites on my floor that I used to be on. And I remember loving the high ceilings, the big windows, just the feel of the building. It feels professional but calm, and there's a lot that I liked about it. And nice, big, clean bathrooms, and just, and I love the location right near the river, right downtown. And so, I know how quickly things turn around. If you don't say yes, someone else will. And so I got really excited. I could feel the energy of yes just take over. I got really excited, and I was like, okay, I want to go see it. I immediately was like standing on that big window ledge, and like my whole, that window is way bigger than me. And I was standing in there and just like, oh my gosh, this is it. And he actually showed me 4 options that were all here. And this one, was the most expensive option, but of course was the one that I was like, yes, this is it. And so I then started to go into what I think you were starting to describe. And I started to then, well, what if I should look at other spaces first?
Right.
What if I'm saying yes too fast? And then so I started to I actually looked at a space that was in the same building as Hannah at Anom. Same building. Basically, I know the building owner. I love her. I was like, well, wouldn't it be great to support her, and rent from her? And then, so I went down this path of indecision for a while. And then all those thoughts showed up of, can I afford this? Am I ready? How do I know which is the right space? And all those questions came up.
Yeah.
And it was because I moved out of the energy in my body and heart and soul of yes into my mind.
Right. Yep.
Where the logical thinking took over and said, but wait. And I got confused.
Yeah.
But
So in an experience like that, does that, after the fact, like after, decisions have been made, you seem like a reflective type person. You'll, think about some stuff here and there, right? Mm-hmm. Does that strengthen your intuition of like knowing that like intuitive feeling, that yes, right? That yes feeling that radiated through your body of like, but then the rational and the questions and the human side, steps in and starts to like stamp on and like do its little like trampling dance on all of our dreams and shit. Cause it's like, but this and but that, but what about that? And all this. It's like, but that yes energy and that feeling of intuition, like I think the stronger we get with understanding what that feels like, the more we get the confidence of like, follow that and the rest will figure itself out.
Yes.
We'll figure this out.
Yes.
But follow that energy because it pulled you that way for a reason.
Absolutely. This is exactly what I guide people through experiencing in my embodiment class that I teach at Anamkara, with Hannah, our mutual connection.
Yeah.
And in my one-on-one coaching too is how do we learn the language of our body and our intuition? It's a different language than the words we hear coming out of our mouth. It's a different language than our thinking process and our intelligence that's in our mind. And so it's a language that is sensory, subtle, nuanced. It's a felt sense. And only when we learn deep listening can we begin to hear it, feel it, see it.
Yeah.
Smell it, taste it, know it.
Exactly. And it's so unique to the individual too. And I think that's kind of where some people I won't say that. My frustration in the beginning of this journey came from that. Because I thought it was like a book, right? Hey, this is where you feel this, right? Here's a yes, here's a no. Here's the spirit talking to you on your right shoulder, right? All this stuff. And I kind of like, whether I realized it or not, I had that kind of expectation of like, this is the way this works because we've kind of presented life that way. Like there's scientific models for this shit. The science is sound and blah, blah, blah. You hear that all the time. That's sound science.
Yeah.
Very, very little science is sound, right? Very little science. It's agreed upon, but it doesn't mean that it's set in stone, right?
It's ever evolving.
Right.
Based on new information.
Exactly.
And yeah, it's true. Like I don't see any of these things as separate. I see them all as supporting one another. You know, our intellect is working, hopefully, in harmony with our intuition. And they're not like battling each other, although it can feel like that sometimes.
Right, yeah.
But I think that they serve an important purpose. And I don't even think one is so superior over the other. It depends on the situation.
Right.
And I think when it comes to making big life decisions, like you're talking about, do I open a space outside my house? Am I ready for that now? we can make a list of pros and cons. We can make sure all the numbers pencil out. We can use our intellectual thinking to make sure it does make sense. And ultimately, though, even if it makes sense on paper, if it doesn't give us yes energy, it's not sustainable.
Right.
Because humans, we need life force to keep showing up. We need yes energy. We need a bigger why than it pencils out on paper. And there's something about that intuitive knowing that is stronger than the obstacles that might get in our way.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And I think a humanistic way to put that for somebody that might be listening, because I get this a lot, like the qualitative versus quantitative, right? Quantitative is like okay, so I'm going to get a new job, right? That new job gets me a raise, right? I'm going to make more money, right? Maybe it's more hours. Okay, that's quantitative. I'll put that in there. But qualitative things like it increases my drive time now from a half an hour to 2 hours. That doesn't quantify in anything, but quality of life is going to go down if you're not a fan of sitting in traffic and you can't find a way to deal with that anxiety. You're not a podcast listener, an audiobook, talk to a friend, whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's those things that gotta factor in too. And I imagine so the embodiment work that you do, teaching people how to listen to themselves, it's not a one or the other, right? It's not my ego is bad and my consciousness is good. It's no, there's a balance between all of this, right?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're bringing this up because so I don't know if this would be a good time to touch on this model that I use that is looking at the human from the perspective of the 8 pillars of self.
Okay, which
and
are?
So really quickly, mind,
okay,
emotion, body, physical body, our soma, our somatic body, energy body, soul self, and then we have our connection to source, the divine, whatever that means to you. Then we have everything outside of us that isn't us, but it really impacts how we feel, what you just mentioned.
Right, yeah.
So external circumstances that are intertwined with the foundations of our life, like our work, our family, the people we spend all of our time with.
Right.
And then 8, our response to that, our behavior. So looking at beyond our experience from the inside out, then how do we put action to that?
Right, yeah.
And so I love that you brought up the importance of actually looking at, you could spend your whole life just doing inner work, trying to heal your life. But if you don't look at the fact that you do not love your job, or that maybe you hate it, or that maybe you're with the wrong person, or that maybe you're living in the wrong city, there are things that just won't be reconciled with your heart, with your soul, with your happiness, with your fulfillment. So sometimes it really does mean looking at the situational aspects of life and having the courage to change it.
Yeah, wow. And that is that holistic view of your life, right? That's looking at your life as a whole and not just these trigger points, right? When I started doing deep, I guess, introspective work, I went to Vipassana, was one of the first deep things that I did, 10-day silent meditation. And it gave me an opportunity to sit and think. And I think up until that point, when I first started meditating, I used to romanticize a lot about just going to live in the mountains. Fuck it, I'm going to go live in the mountains, go live in a cave, I'm going to live in a monastery, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And, well, of course, if you live in a place where there's no other humans or a limited amount of humans, or maybe humans that don't talk to each other, your ability to be triggered is going to go down, because humanity is what triggers a lot of us, right? We can get our shit straight for a lot of purposes. Yeah. But then we go into the world and we're like, what the fuck are you doing?
Exactly.
And it can be very triggering, but it's we need that though, because a lot of the times, we might feel, whether we realize it or not, we might feel we got shit figured out. We might feel like here's a fucked up one for me. I didn't realize I thought I was always right. Until you really sit and think about it, and you're like, if I'm judging all of these people for the way they think, invertedly, I must think I'm always right, which I know that I'm not.
Wow.
So where the hell does that come from, right? And how do I set that burden down? Let me take that hat off because that's not right. You know?
Kudos to you, my friend, for having the humble courage to own up to that, because sometimes when we see those things, it's hard to say it out loud.
It really is. It really is. And that's a lot of that ego stuff, right? And that's where I think that's where the idea for me really championed the kill the ego side, right? And I fell victim to the kill the ego moniker for a long time. And I even took a lot of medicine journeys to do that.
And that was the stage you were in at the time.
Right.
And so that was what you needed then.
Yep, because it was taking over. There was no balance. It was all ego.
Yeah.
The ego was like the abominable snowman, just like rolling around, just like playing badminton with fucking planes and cars and shit. But it needed to just like take a step back so that there could be balance. But it didn't need to go away. And that's what I learned is that it could not go away. I cannot survive without my ego. And that's not an egoic statement. That's a knowledge of balance, of whatever the balance is. It needs to be there.
Well, and I could speak to this a little bit about how being out of balance one way or the other is a disservice to us, because I had an experience of really wanting to heal the ego self as well.
Yeah.
And that my ego was injured in a way where I loathed myself. So it wasn't how you think of ego, like, oh, she has this like inflated sense of self-importance. It didn't show up like that for me.
Right.
It showed up like I developed this way of existing in the world that was really protective and in some ways performative, which makes me really cringe. Like, I really value authenticity, but out of survival, I became a chameleon. And I very much mastered the art of who am I in this situation?
Okay.
Who am I in this situation? And that was out of the truth of who I am is I do want to make a valuable contribution to a space. When I'm in front of people, I want them to feel seen and heard and loved, and I want our interaction to be a positive one, but I was like swimming in the darkness of depression and feeling lost. And so I didn't want to bring that heavy stuff into a room every time I showed up. And so my survival strategy was show up as the woman with a smile on her face, show up as the one who's got jokes, show up as the one who's dancing around. And I really did whatever it took, including, drinking a lot of alcohol to maintain that version of the vibrant personality that I wished I could be,
Right, yeah.
And so, all that to say, what were we talking about before I dived into that? I took us on a bit of a journey here.
Well, actually, I actually want to touch on that real quick because I'm unpacking a lot of that with myself too. And so for me, that manifested as the people pleaser.
Yes,
right.
exactly.
And when it finally hit me, and it wasn't until like actually a few months ago that it really hit me, that I'd been basically a chameleon, right? I didn't really have a personality, and this is me coloring my past now with new information. I started to speak in absolutes. I've never had a personality. I've never been a good friend. I've never really been, had opinions of my own, right? And even though I know that's not true, I know there's parts of me that think that's true because of that chameleon, that people pleaser. And where mine manifested, where I could draw it for myself, was my dad was a coast-to-coast truck driver. Gone for months at a time, home for a weekend. Months at a time, gone, home for a weekend. So very like yo-yo-y. Loved him. He was great. He's a good dad for what he could be. But my mom raised 3 boys on her own, right? God bless fucking Saint Faye, right? And my mom, when we would piss her off, get her to that boiling point, she's like, I'm going to call your dad. You're in trouble now. I'm going to call your dad. This is like beginning of like car phones. And so dad would get on the phone and we would expect to get yelled at. And my dad would say, hey, look, I'm 1,000 miles away. quit pissing your mom off. Just play politics. Just tell her what she wants to hear. Just nod and smile. And I'm like, got it, Dad. I can do that. And that's basically what I started to do in social situations too. Just nod and smile.
Yeah.
Somebody told an off-color joke. I'm like, oh, that's kind of offensive, but haha, cool. Yeah, whatever. Like I didn't have a voice to say what I really felt like I needed to say, or to really explore that. Right. And so when I finally realized that, I went into a little manic spiral of sorts of depression and confusion. But what I'm trying to do now, and what I've really tried to and this has been the impetus of that is, okay, so you figured this out about you. How do you make it your superpower now?
Yes.
Right? How do you alchemize, one of the things that you specialize in, how do you alchemize that now into a superpower and not let it be something that's like, oh, ho hum, let me just dive deeper into my Eeyore fucking, mask. No, let's right? Oh, can't even do that right.
I relate to that cute little cutie so much.
But it's like, okay, so now you know how to be non-offensive to multiple groups of people.
Yes.
Find your authenticity within your way you want to present yourself, and then utilize that superpower that you've been honing for all these years to intermingle with all these different groups of people. And you're like a bridge almost, right?
Yes. My gosh.
Yeah. Yes. So it's like, it's these cool ways where we can get out of our own victimhood and please process it. Process your shit, right?
Yeah.
But don't get trapped in the victim side of what has been a survival thing. And now that you're really good at it and you know it, you can utilize that for an agent of good instead of this depressive thing that's been kind of weighing you down for however many years.
Oh my gosh, you just described how my whole career took a turn and is what it is now. Exactly that.
Hell yeah.
Exactly. It hit me one day. First of all, before I dive into that, I just want to really acknowledge you for sharing all of that. And I really appreciate self-awareness and vulnerability and the willingness to see ourselves for where we have been out of alignment, where we have been wrong, where we have maybe hurt others, but it wasn't our fault, or where we can see ourselves as at the effect of all of these things that weren't our fault, but also see it as our responsibility if we would like to change it.
Right.
And, everything I'm hearing you saying is very this beautiful, compassionate, non-judging way of looking at yourself to say, oh, here's what was going on. I can see that now. And how do I process through that and continue to become who I'm becoming now? And it's in a way that's lighthearted, even though what we're talking about can be quite dark when you're in it.
Yeah.
And I love that this is exactly how my work is. This is how my work is with myself and with my clients. Hopefully, that's my intention all the time, and usually is able to happen in that way where we do this deep work with lightheartedness, in that really, if we do let the ego take a little exhale and let the soul kind of take up more space, we can do this in a way that is curious, compassionate, and say, okay, I'm willing to look at the truth of where things have been, where I've been showing up in a way that's not honest, that's not helping me, that's not helping others. And we can also have compassion for why, right? Looking at our upbringing, looking at social conditioning, the way that society molds and shapes us, looking at the knowing that we are doing our best, even if there's a lot of ugliness behind it. And that is really the truth. I think humans are so infinitely fascinating and beautiful in our magic and in our mess. And I think when we're willing to look at the ugly, the hard, the shadow, and I don't think the shadow's ugly in any way. I think the shadow's beautiful. But when we're willing to look at what we're most afraid to look at and what we're most what we most want to wish it didn't exist.
Right.
When we're willing to sort of look at those parts of ourselves as like innocent child parts inside that are like, oh, there's a part of me that feels terrified to let someone down.
Right.
How old is that part? They might be 5.
Yeah.
You know, and we've never evolved past that. And that became a trauma response, which became a mode of behavior, which then we started to believe is who we are.
Right.
But it's not. And so that's why I'm so in love with the fact that humans, once we're willing to look and feel and hold it all lightly and say, like, so what? I get to change all this.
Yeah.
I get to change. Then we start to let so much light in, so much possibility. We realize how limitless we are. We realize I have no idea what's actually possible for me, because as I allow myself to grow and evolve, more and more things reveal themselves that I didn't know were possible. But if we go down the path of staying stuck, like you kind of mentioned, right? If we fall to victimhood of this happened to me, therefore, this is what my life will be. When we decide that, it is what we unfortunately create. And so there came a point in my life where when I was in that ego state of being self-defeated, right? And I say that's an ego state because it's a very protective way of living. It's a very like, I'm so afraid to be wrong. I'm so afraid to be unliked. I'm so afraid to offend. And all of that made it so that it was like, I seemed really humble, but the truth is my ego was leading my life.
Right.
And if I could find the soulfulness, my heart energy, if I could find the depth of my true self, then I would realize that I'm here to also receive this experience, not just to perform it.
Right, yeah.
And so I also get to be here because I get to be here, and I get to, like, what if I didn't have to be good enough? What if I just get to be alive?
Right, yeah.
And experience that?
Yeah. And what does, I mean, you know, it's so fun to like think about those things, because like those are constant emotions going on in our head. I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough.
Oh,
I'll
yeah.
never be.
That's
Well,
a
what
huge
is-
one for me.
What is good enough? Have you ever just defined like what good enough is and who you're trying to be good enough for?
Yeah.
You know, I think there's a lot of those questions like, so I just had 5 days in the dark and a lot of cool shit happened, but there's a lot of boredom, right?
Yeah.
And that boredom gave me an opportunity to look at some things pretty deeply, you know, and it was like, it was interesting because I like had deep meditations, right? Cool meditations, had great mantras, had good DMT experiences in my dream state, had a lot of emotions, like all this stuff. And even though like I had this intentional practice going into it, the times for me to like think deeply about some of the stuff that I did was very unintentional, and it happened when I was bored out of my fucking mind. I had already done all my things. I'd gone through panic attacks because I thought it was a certain day, and I had the courage to ask what day it was, and it was a day and a half before the day I thought it was. I thought it was Wednesday night, and it was Tuesday morning, and I'm like,
Oh my God.
and all the panic happened, you know, what am I going to do now for these next 4 days and all this shit, right? But it was in the moments of boredom where my mind finally ticked over to some of these things that I thought deeply about like where I've come from, how far I've come, right? Like the almost like the accolades I was afraid to give myself just
so
for
beautiful.
making movement, right? Nobody knows how hard your journey is except for you, because you're the one doing it, right?
Oh
You're
my
the one
gosh,
walking the
yes.
path. And we get so entrenched in our journey that we forget to stop and say like, my point A was here. I'm at point like D. Holy shit, man. That's like, I still got some work to do, but like from A to D, like that's a big fucking step, man. Like good for you.
Oh
right.
my gosh.
And just like breathe in and not,
Yes.
again, not like champion our ego, but also not being afraid to be proud of ourselves.
Oh, I think it's so soulful to be willing to celebrate life with unbridled joy and be able to look at ourselves as a human just like anyone else.
Yeah.
And be able to experience ourselves as another best friend that we have. You know, really the only one that will be there forever, maybe.
Right.
And so I actually think it's far from ego to do what you just did. I think it's real. I think it's honest. I think what's not honest is when we say, "Ugh, I'm the worst person. I hate myself. I used to have ants," which is automatic negative thoughts running through my head all day long.
Yeah.
That was an ego thing. That was not a soulful thing. I think it's a lot more soulful and heart-led to say, you know what? No one else knows my journey but me, and I can see the truth of how far I've come.
Right. Because
that's honest. There's truth and authenticity in that. And you're not walking into a room being like, "Everybody, look at me."
Come see how good I look.
Come and see how good I look. You are sitting there in darkness and nothingness.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
And you're touching on some truths that I think the whole world needs to hear. That thing you just said about nobody knows how, can you say that again?
Nobody knows how hard you've worked or the journey you've taken except for you.
Yeah.
Because even if this is one of the reasons.
No one knows what it feels like except for you because you're the one in it.
Yep.
I loved the way that you said that because it really made me realize, you know, and I know this, but it's so true that we will never know what it feels like to be anyone else, no matter how close we may think we are with them.
Right.
And no one else will ever know what it feels like to be us. And that is ultimately why we are all doing a dance with loneliness. We are. All of us are, because the truth is, you're never going to get to crawl inside my brain or my, you know, no one, is your green the same green that I see? Is when you drink peppermint tea, do you taste the same thing?
Exactly.
The temperature in the room, what does this feel like inside your body? We will never know.
Right. It's such a mindfuck to think about. I just finished a book called The End of Averages, and it was fascinating because it talked a lot about kind of that concept and that idea that we're subconsciously walking towards. And the way the book started was it talked about in the 1870s is when the United States started to look at humanity as based off an average. And it was at first it was you're trying to be the average. And then it got to the point some guy named Taylor got involved, and he was also involved in the schooling system with Rockefeller. And then they turned averagarianism into you got to be better than. But if you're below, then you become a worker, and if you're better than, you become a manager, stuff like that. So we've been basing ourselves off of these obscure averages for almost a century now.
Yeah.
And there's 8.5 billion people in the world. Nobody's going to fit an average, right? There's no way that we're going to fit. If you take brain scans, for example, one of the examples they give in the book is they say we'll take 1,000 brain scans and average them together, and then through that average we'll say, okay, so we think about colors in this part, we have emotions in this part, but then if you break all those 1,000 brains back out into the individual brains, and then you take the average and say, okay, so in the average we say in the frontal lobe is where we feel emotions, but in this person's brain it's in the back lobe, right? It's different, right? But on average it's in the front, but on this person it's in the back. So if that person goes in for some kind of brain thing, they're going to go to the front lobe, but it's in the back lobe, right? So it's how much of that is one being active in our society, but also how much of our thought process is based off of that, right? I've got to fit in. I've got to be an average. I've got to I can't be too weird. I can't be too eccentric. I can't have tattoos that are visible. I can't, all this shit that if we look now, there's a big swing in individualism. Huge swing towards individualism, which I embrace. I love, but it's almost like the anti-average. Right? I'm so done with trying to fit into your box. Not only am I going to create a box, I'm creating boxes inside of those boxes that are very unique to my own personal boxes that no one will ever be in. But I still expect you to understand the box that I'm in, which is great because we've swung so far the pendulum to one side to be an average that it has to almost go back the other way in the same extremities to find a balance. Right? To find a balance of like, I don't care what you recognize as, you're a human being in front of me. I'm going to respect you because I love you. Right? I don't care what you have between your legs or above your chest or whatever you think that you are. Fuck, Joni Mitchell, beautiful, amazing fucking musician, recognizes as a black man.
Okay.
Right.
Great.
You know, I'm like, and I don't know enough to have an opinion about that, right?
Exactly.
But that's your knowledge, right? That's knowledge that's out there, right? And if you're a woman that recognizes as a man, in my eyes of ignorance, maybe, you know, why is this such a obscure thing for Joni Mitchell to recognize as a specific type of man, as a black man, you know? And it's, again, maybe that's the pendulum swinging very far in the opposite direction just to prove a point that we'll find a little middle ground here. But, you know, it's so interesting to see the extremes humanity will go to prove a fucking point.
Oh my gosh,
you know?
we're so ridiculous. But also, there really is this this thing of like the boxes, the identity boxes that have the labels on them. Those are man-made.
Right, exactly.
And when you look at nature, everything is organic. It's an organic shape. Same with humans. And I really have done many, many years now of just noticing and studying and actively studying about what are all the things I believe to be 100% true that are made up by the men that came before me. And I say men on purpose.
Right, no, I get you.
And also, I have nothing against men. I think the patriarchy has hurt men as much as women.
Right.
I really, where I'm at now is I see human beings as individuals who are each completely unique. And yet we are interdependent in that the collective experience is required for our completeness.
Right.
And so individualism is beautiful in the sense of recognizing that we are all unique and allowing for that and encouraging that and celebrating that. It's beautiful. How boring is life if we all fit in these labeled little boxes? We don't. None of us do.
Yeah.
It's suffocating. And but also individualism becomes problematic when we say, fuck all those people. Well, I don't need anyone, you know?
Totally.
And that's where a lot of depression, isolation, and disconnection from our purpose happens, because none of us are really, I see us all as like, I could see it either as a tapestry and we're all a thread, or a puzzle and we're all a piece. But it's not just with humans, it's with everything that exists.
Right.
Every piece of energy that exists in the universe is a puzzle piece to the puzzle, which is everything. And so everything that's here is on purpose and is a different shape, but it all fits together perfectly. And if we change our shape to fit the mold, now there's a gaping hole in the universe of who we were supposed to be. And that's why I am hell-bent on what I refer to as the rebellion of authenticity, which is be brave enough to be who you are, because that is why you're here.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to butcher this story. I'm going to try to get the point across, but I'm going to butcher it. But it's so beautiful because it works so well into the puzzle analogy, the two analogies you just put out there. So there was a convention a couple of years ago, big science convention in Europe, and they'd quantum mechanics, quantum physics has this new theory about the way that they can look at the universe, and the way that this, again, I'm going to butcher this, so anybody listening, I apologize. I'll try to find the actual cited YouTube speech that this guy gave. But basically, this quantum physics professor got up there and was talking about how one of the ways that they're looking at the universe now is basically like a grid, and at every grid point there's a point that every point in that grid is also reflected from every single point. So showing that everything is interconnected, right?
Yeah.
It's like you can see everything from this point except that point, but the next point over, you can see everything also from that point, including the previous point, right? And so everything is interconnected.
Yeah.
And so this person was at the conference, heard the story, heard the speech, was very moved by it, but was also reminded of a story. And this person was, I think, of a Hindu background. Pulled the speaker aside afterwards and was like, "Hey, love what you said. Beautiful stuff. Have you ever heard the story of Indra's net?" And this guy was like, "Don't have any idea who Indra is, let alone Indra's net." So Indra's net was one of the it's one of the very first stories in the Vedas. Vedas is one of the oldest spiritual texts that we know of. And Indra's net, Indra was the god of the universe. He's a incarnate of Vishnu, the preserver, right? So you have Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva are the triumvirate of Hindu lore. So Indra, in the creation of this universe, cast out a net, and at every point the net met, the jewel hung down, and from every jewel you could see every other jewel except the jewel that it was. And the guy was just baffled because the scientific conclusion they had just come to in quantum mechanics and quantum physics mirrored this ancient thousands of year old story of Indra's net.
Beautiful.
And it's like, we don't know shit, but we're trying to figure it out, you know? And I'm not saying look to the old passages as verbatim, right? You can't do that either. You can't read the Bible for verbatim, right? There's a lot of metaphoricalness that goes inside of a lot of these stories, a lot of these tales, right?
And interpretation,
exactly.
bias,
Yeah.
different ways of saying it, and then different ways of reading it, and internalizing a meaning that wasn't meant, and then spreading that and rewriting that in a slightly different way until the meaning is completely lost.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like the worst game of telephone ever.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That is. It's so true.
It starts over here like God loves everybody, and all of a sudden it gets to the end. It's like God hates everybody. It's like, what the fuck happened in between? Where'd all the love go? Fucking hell, man. Yes, exactly.
And then there are these truths that echo through the walls of time to where it's like, of course this was in an ancient myth, and now quantum physics is proving it to be maybe true.
Right.
And of course, people just have this idea in their mind, the visual I have in my mind all the time of the universe as a puzzle. Where did I get that? I don't know. But there's a lot of things that just feel like, oh, that makes sense to me, and I don't know where I got it from.
Right.
And a lot of that comes from allowing for contemplation and asking questions.
Right.
And I think when we all spend time, and I think this is the point of, or one of the benefits of meditation or prayer or silent retreats, dark retreats like you brought up, is that when we allow silence and the deep quiet and the releasing of the mind, the doing of life, the having to prove, having to do, having to achieve, having to accomplish, all of that, when we really let ourselves exhale all of that and soften into just experiencing like a plant, I'm alive. I am alive.
Yeah.
When we really soften into that place, there is, there's no books, there's no podcasts in your ear, there's no learning, and yet there is wisdom that you sense, that you learn, that you hear, that you visualize. There's things you learn that you've never learned somehow, some way. How did I become aware of memories that maybe my ancestors had? Or how does this thing feel so real to me that never happened to me?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Because there is actual memories, wisdom, and intelligence stored in our DNA that we were born with. And if we didn't go to school, we would still continue to learn as we continue to uncover the intelligence that actually lives in our body anyway.
Right.
Which is how animals navigate the world. They don't go to animal school to figure out how to fly and migrate south for the winter.
Yep. I love that. It's the idea of the human being versus the human doing. Like, we're all human doings right now. We're fucking doing shit all the damn time. It's like, just be a human being. Be for a little bit, right? And whatever that means to you. Like, I think I might have been in the midst of a big plant medicine journey when I did this, but I remember, I think I was just coming, like, not down, but I had a dip in my big medicine journey, and I was at the house, and I found myself just outside staring at a tree. And it wasn't like I was, sometimes in those journeys I'm like talking to the tree, to be fair. But I was just appreciating the tree, like sitting there just watching the tree, and I think we need to make time for that, like the time for reflection, the time for contemplation, the time, not even for meditation. Like, cause for like myself, I could talk myself into that. Like, oh, well, I meditate 3 times a day. I got time to sit and think and contemplate, but I'm still trying to accomplish something. Like, just being, right? Just the act of human being. I'm not accomplishing anything. I'm not trying to clear my mind. I'm not trying to, like, reach a state of enlightenment. I'm not trying to do anything like that. I'm just being whatever it is, right? And there's so much, like, beauty that happens. Like, the best ideas come when we're in the shower, when we're just being.
Yep.
When we're about to fall asleep, when we're just being, right?
Yep.
We're not doing shit, And if we can make more space for that, I think there would be a lot more of our own aha moments about the self, about our bodies, about our lives that we're living, when we're not constantly trying to do shit to progress or to fix or to whatever it is, When
we try to force progress of even like, okay, there's the obvious things people try to force, like success and making money and achieving goals and all those things, building their homes and getting their education. But also, we see in the healing world, in the coaching world, in the personal development space, there's a lot of forcing of, okay, I'm going to heal by my birthday next, in July or something, right? I'm going to heal this trauma that I've had my whole life by that deadline.
Are we there yet? It's like, come on, man.
Or like, even having the agenda of enlightenment is really ego-driven, right?
Really, yeah.
And so that's where we see spiritual elitism coming in and being like, okay, I'm better at having like my intuition is stronger than yours. I win. Like that whole thing happens because that's when we're being human doings.
Yeah.
And, this takes us all the way back to the idea that I started talking about but didn't finish of the difference between being in the ego self, right? Whether it's like, oh, I think I'm always right, like you mentioned, or me saying, I think I'm always wrong, or like I have this protective shell around me that feels terrible. And so either way, we're like living too far into the ego. And then, I was talking about like when the pendulum swings too far to the soul journey, right? So you talked a little bit about this a couple times of like when the pendulum swings to the opposite to try to strike a balance. So like somewhere along the way when I realized I had to heal or I was probably going to die, truthfully, I softened into learning what it means to be to such a degree that like like when you were talking about the ego's not bad, we need it. That's so true because I think I got so far into that like soul-led place of like, I don't even need to work. Like the whole point is just to be alive, right? Like you go into that place where it's like, maybe I am a plant.
Right, yeah.
And then it's too far that way. So what happened for me is like, and you could think about it in terms of feminine energy and masculine energy too. Not gendered, but in an energy sense of the feminine is the felt sense of the beingness, and the masculine is more the doingness energy, right? And so I fell so far into the feminine that I healed a lot of my stuff, and I learned how to love myself and my life. And it was everything. It was the elixir. You know, I needed to learn that I had a soul in there, not just a mind. But here's the thing. We are in a body as a human. We're not just a ball of light. And so if we reject the human experience and as a collective, then it gets self-defeating too. Yeah. And that's where it's like, oh, we need the balance of the both. And we need to honor that, like a lot of the genius that arises in the being state will never be born into earth for other people to receive and experience if we don't then do something about it. And so I love what you said about, you know, we get our best ideas when the pressure's off. There's nothing to do. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's what I need to do for my next book or my next course or whatever it is I'm creating. And so those things work harmoniously, beautifully together in that when you allow more time for being and asking curious questions and just contemplating and releasing the need to do, you actually put yourself in a position to be more financially successful. And that's what people don't get. They think, oh, I need to trade hours of my life in exchange for money. And the more I give, the more I make. It's a math equation. That's it. Not true. Yeah. The more we give, the less we receive in terms of freedom currency. And freedom currency, time currency, oh my gosh, that's more important than money in my opinion.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, and I think it's perspective, right? You know, and it's
well, they all matter.
Right. Exactly. You know, they do all matter. And it's, you know, I think it's while we're going through our changes in life, it's understanding that there is your own personal balance to the change that you need to find, right? And it's embracing that courage to go through the change. And sometimes we go through that, the initial, like, okay, throw out the old life, get fucked. It was terrible. I'm not doing anything about that. I don't want any corporate understandings. I don't want any acronyms. I don't want any of that. But as you move over to the new life, I think what's really important is to understand, like, there was a reason that life was there before, and there's transferable skills that can move over as you change. So if you just ball up previous life and throw it in the wastebasket, you're wasting all that time that you did spend learning some very important lessons. Either, like for me, for example, like when I switched over to this style of work, I wanted nothing to do with corporations. I wanted nothing to do with like budgets and P&Ls and all that shit. But what I found was all of that's very beneficial in owning your own business.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And in the world that we're in this holistic world, to be fair, there's not a lot of structure to it. Yeah. There's a lot of people just flying by the seat of their pants, doing the best they can. So I think, you know, understanding that my corporate life that I led beforehand, even though there's aspects I want nothing to do with, the structure that it allowed me to see in budgets and P&Ls and all this stuff, like scheduling for hundreds of people, like all that blended very well into this new life that I created for myself. In a very beautiful way, right? So, you know, it's like that understanding of like this previous life isn't a waste of time. No. You chose that for whatever reason, but now you're choosing this. And so what can you take from that previous to help you embrace the change that you're moving towards? So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Yeah. You don't have to, but allowing for, again, my own personal example, 6-figure salary, thought I couldn't do without it. Making way less than that now, way happier, feel more secure, feel more stable, but I'm not feel like I'm killing myself to reach an amount of zeros or a fucking amount of commas in my bank account, right? It's like, it's just, it's reassessing my own personal values, my own personal understanding of life as I was going through the change to allow a change to happen in what some may see it as a negative way, like a negative income, right? Income's going down.
Yeah.
But there's balance.
Yeah.
And I'm still secure. I'm still being taken care of. My kids are still taken care of. I can still go on vacations if I want. I still have play money if I want to. Not only I'm just paying my bills, right? So it's allowing yourself to see how this change can benefit you and move with you, even though it might be something that somebody else might be like, ooh, tisk tisk, you're making less money, or now you don't have as prominent of a title of whatever it is, right? And those are both work examples, but it's like, I think, with the type of people that you work with and that we both like kind of see, that's part of it, right? It's softening the understanding of what that change means to you as the person, not to your family or to your friend group or to whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
How is this benefiting you as a person?
Oh my gosh. I love everything you just shared so much. And I'm celebrating you for making that huge change in your life. I didn't know that you came from that background at all. And I think it's incredibly brave to move away from the status quo and do what might look like moving backwards to some in order to move forwards for yourself. And, it's the concept of it. There are all different kinds of currencies, and understanding that ultimately, because everything is energy, money is energy too. Money is an idea that I exchange my energy in exchange for this energy. And so we just need to, or we have the opportunity to look at how much of my life am I giving in exchange for what I'm receiving? And does even the experience of being in that feel like a part of my life that's worth living? I think a lot of people separate work from life.
Yeah.
And that's something I've really, and I just want to say, I don't think there's right or wrong when it comes to the career you choose or the salary you want. The work I'm doing now isn't better than the work I was doing before. It's not more important. It's not superior in any way. It's more aligned for the truth of who I am. I used to be a designer. And before that, I was a bartender. And those jobs are important and valuable and amazing if you're the right person for the job and if you like the way that it feels to live your life inside of that career path. And, so it's like understanding, again, it's like the puzzle pieces. The world needs every piece. None of us are better than anyone else. And when we realize that something's out of alignment for us, it's because it's not a reflection of who we are becoming. It's who we once were, but we are all meant to evolve.
Yeah.
And so, this idea of letting yourself make less so that you could feel happier, I think is the pathway to abundance anyway. Because it's not sustainable to stay in a job that you don't like. And a lot of people separate work from life and say, well, this is work, this is for the purpose of money, and this is life, this is for the purpose of fulfillment, and they are separate. I just can't, personally, doesn't compute in my awareness in any way. And I've never been able to experience life like that in those compartments. And so that's why it was imperative for me to figure out, what the heck am I in love with and how can I do that for money? Because it's the only way that I can personally survive this life.
Yeah.
I cannot dedicate 40 hours a week to something that doesn't feel important to me, or even it's important, I can recognize that it exists. But it's not actually right for me. And that's how I was able to take off all those masks, was being able to say, if I have to wear a mask to go to work, it's not the right job.
Right.
So what's the job I can do where I'm just authentically me, keeping it weird, and not having, I can show up on my worst day and still slay.
Right.
That's how you know you're really in the right place.
Yeah, I love that. Hell yeah. Well, and so when you were making that change in yourself to get to that authenticity, and now seeing, because I think in this journey work, in this space holding work that we do, we end up seeing people that are going through all the things that we're going through, and we're like we're helping ourselves through the people that we're helping. So I imagine as you're wrestling with this idea of change and the authenticity side, you're probably seeing people that you're coaching through as well, embodiment of your doubts and, finding a way to alchemize all that. And, so being courageous enough to find change and to step towards change within yourself, and then probably being mirrored back from the clients you're working with, which gives you that extra little gumption to be like, okay, Steph, you're doing all right. We're on the right path. We're changing too. It's kind of comical at times, just to see that mirror.
Oh my gosh.
Constantly. And
yes,
like, I don't know about you, but I was pretty good about rationalizing life, before I just accepted for, healthy skepticism, I think is still good, but the over rationalization of life, I think is also, like, we can find a balance there. But, there's so many of those stories that, like, I'd just be like, have to close my own jaw while talking to a client of like, God, this is just resonating so much with my own shit.
Yeah.
Holy Christ.
Yes.
Is it like, was that kind of encouraging after the shock and awe kind of goes away of like, okay, no, Steph, you're doing it right. We're on the right path. Clearly we're getting this feedback as that, like kick in the butt, keep moving forward.
Oh my gosh. I've completely released any worry that I'm unqualified to serve the people who will find me.
Yeah.
And that's because the people who find me feel like they're a soul family. Like, okay, we've all had different nuances to our story, but there is something so similar that you're right. It's like I can't help but smile even when they're telling me something really. Obviously, I'm meeting people where they are with respect and compassion, but you're right. There's like a little bit of inner amusement that happens when you're like, of course you're coming to me. Of course, because I know all about this. Not that I could ever understand what it feels like to be them in their experience, because I can't. But if someone can, I'm probably pretty close to being the person who can say, I see you, I hear you, and here's my invitation for how to continue to move forward and through this, because I've been here before. Right. And I've heard this little, I guess, I wanted to say quote, but I think it's more like I don't know what you would call it, but it's just the statement that says, we are best equipped to serve who we used to be.
Wow.
And I think that's very true, because while there's a part of us that remains the same, I mean, we're the same. Right. We're the same from the day we're born and for the rest of our life, in a sense. There's like a true essence to us that's real and unwavering. But so much of us is ever changing. And where was I going with that again? Oh yeah, we're best. I started thinking about a whole other tangent. Oh my gosh. Okay, brain, reel yourself in. Right. Yeah. Breathe. So this idea that we could continue to hold that authentic essence of ourselves, but yet like give permission for the fact that we are not meant to stay the same. And so like there's nothing wrong with us when we're able to see, oh, I'm ready to let this go. And I'm ready to move this along and whatever it is. And then we find that when we put it out there that I need help, I want guidance, that the right person is there. And this is something that has guided my personal healing experience and journey so much, is following that next yes this person for now, this person for now. And so now when I'm the space holder or the guide, I have so much trust in the co-creation that we're doing together. I have so much trust in us.
Yeah.
It's a power balanced relationship that says, I'm here to hold a safe space for your self-exploration. So instead of like me teaching them about how to be a better them, they're teaching me. And I'm holding them safe in that transformation. And so I see myself as like at the bottom, not at the top.
Okay.
I'm being a vessel.
Yeah.
And they are being held by the vessel.
And when we can find ways to teach, whether we're knowingly teaching or not, that allows us to see the information from a different angle, and there's a special way that lands with not only with us, but with the person that we're talking to, because when we can teach something, that means we understand it. And so when, like you said, you're turning that teaching around to the client, they are the teacher, because they're the ones unpacking all this shit. It's like we're sharing space, we're maybe asking probing questions.
Yeah.
But if I went to somebody and say, oh, this is what I feel is wrong with you, right? It's like, no, that's not it. But if you ask questions of what you might have an intuition about, you're intuitively like, oh, well, maybe this person's feeling anxious about this thing. And so if I can ask questions that lead them to an understanding about, drawing their own conclusion about this thing and their emotion state around it, and it's like, oh my God, their ego is championed. Hey, we just figured this shit out.
Yeah.
I don't need the accolades. I'm not the one living your body, right? It's like, yes, cool. You figured that out. And we can, like, it does something different with our own biochemistry.
Yeah, I love that you brought up, it's true, there is power in that. If you do have a well-honed intuition, which is like a huge part of what I'm bringing to my sessions, is I do provide insight. I do provide a mirror. I do provide like little nudges, helping people to see what they can't see that I can, right? So it's not like, oh, they're doing all the work. Like, I really am guiding, but I'm also not seeing myself as the expert on them. And I think that's the distinction. And then when it comes to the thing of like, man, my clients are going through the same thing as me, because I forgot to finish talking about that, is I see it, and it gives me so much confidence in our success of working together that I'm like, oh, I know this. I know this intimately well. And I think there's a really important distinction. And I see people making this, I don't want to say mistake, but it might not be as supportive as people think when they say, I have been through this exact same thing and I know exactly how you feel. People are trying to say you're not alone.
Right.
And that is so loving.
Right.
But what they're saying is, I am not opening up to listen to let you tell me what this is exactly like for you. And so I think it's important, as any human who might be listening to a friend who's struggling, or as a person working as a coach or a healer or somewhere in the leadership role, to understand that while we may have an expertise, whether personal or studied, I find that the most results with clients happen when we empower them to teach us about them instead of the other way around.
Yeah.
And say, and of course I teach them tools and valuable things that they can take away. It's not like, I'm pretending like, oh, I know nothing,
Yeah.
But it's more like, you know what? We're equals here. We've come together for this purpose of you becoming the next version of you, and we're going to do that together.
Yeah.
And so I really see it as a collaboration, and it requires their participation. Yeah.
Well, that's the big part of it. I think that's where a lot of talk therapy goes wrong, is you just sit there and get you talk about shit. You just keep talking and talking, and you talk about opinions. It can be helpful. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like knocking it all, but interwoven with other modalities, because that's where you start to like set some shit down, get different perspectives on some things, and I think it's so important to be able to pivot with your clients in those kind of modalities. And that I think leads to my understanding as to why, people like yourself are being sought out now, because you see a human being as a human being. It's not like I have a chart of things I need to check off. I need to write a prescription for some shit because I need to make my doctor's thing, and it's like, I see you as a person, right? We're going to have a conversation. We're going to meet as people. I have a bag of tricks. Don't get me wrong. I got a modality trick, right?
Totally.
But if I just set you up there and like throw out like session A, because that's what I've got in my head, and not meet you where you're at, then that might be the wrong thing for you.
Yeah.
We might do breath work when breath work is going to trigger you and you need to be calmed down. We need to do more energy work, right? We need more like hands-on Reiki. And so I think like that is where people like yourself and myself and just healers outside of the normal doctor patient kind of idea, people are migrating towards that kind of work, because we're seeing people as people, not as an appointment, not as just like checking a box,
Yeah. And there's a move away from the hierarchy of expert and patient.
Right.
Right? Like, I'm the one with the expertise as the doctor, and you're the patient with the problem. So it's my job to tell you how you will get fixed. And there's even it's frowned upon to come forward with your own intuitive knowing about what might be going on with your body. Right. It's very frowned upon in a lot of doctors' offices. And I just want to also say, like, doctors hold a crucial, vital role in all of us being safe and okay. And again, a piece to the puzzle. And so I don't believe the work I'm doing is better or worse. I think that it serves a purpose for the people that need this work at the point in which they need it.
Right.
And it serves the important purpose of leveling out, even though I've been studying this stuff very actively since 2018, and then just as like maybe a hobby before that.
Yeah.
There's a lot that I've learned. There's a lot of modalities I'm capable of teaching people. There's a lot that I help people with, which is why I'm qualified, right? But really, at the core of it is I'm not seeing myself as the expert. I see myself as a curious explorer to discover with my clients, okay, so what is it that you're wanting that you aren't embodied in yet? How is it that you want to feel in your life? What makes you feel alive? And why aren't you there yet? What's in the way? And then we go from there. And it's a discovery process of how it's not that your life up until now has been wrong.
Right.
You're not broken. I don't need to fix you. I can't fix you. There's nothing wrong with you. You are where you are because of where you've been, and where you've been has been an important part of your journey, and it all serves a purpose. And now what? Because we get to change. And one of the most inspiring principles to me is this very simple concept of what we are not changing, we are choosing. What we are not changing, we are choosing. Right?
That's a tough one.
A lot of people
100%.
think, oh, this is just the way it is. They think that about the planet and sustainability. They think that about themselves, their family, about everything.
Yep.
It's just the way it is. That closed-minded assumption that it's just the way it is, when really our unwillingness to consider that it could maybe be changed is the choice we are exactly making.
Right. Oh my god. I got bitch slapped with that entire concept recently. It was so funny. So in my darkness experience, it was one of the first days, and I got up and I was sitting in a meditation, and my life presented itself to me in a Buddhist painting style called Tonka. And it's not a mandala in the sense of the like the over patternedness and the geometry of it, but it is balanced like a mandala is, but it's more of like a pictorial story. And so my life came out as this beautiful Tonka, and it was funny because like I saw like all aspects of it, right?
Oh
and
my
it was so beautiful, right? It was gorgeous. There was definitely parts where I'm like, okay, need to put some attention there, maybe clean up this spot, rebuild that, right? And then this thought, like, and I was very emotional. I was weeping
Like a
while
kaleidoscope of your entire life.
Yeah, it was very cool, and it was nonlinear. It was all very.
I wish
like,
AI could just create a visual for us from your brain.
I see it so clearly, and it's so interesting. But the funny thought is that I had this overwhelming like excitement to get back to life.
Yeah.
But then this sub thought kind of came up, and it was like, thank God you got past that previous life that you were just kind of given, and you've created this life. And as soon as like that idea of the thought left my head, it was like, you think you didn't choose that other life?
Right.
You think that you just stumbled into alcoholism and drug abuse and being a shitty dad and having a job that took up more time than you ever thought you'd have in your entire life? You think that was an accident? No, you chose that too. You might have more consciously chose this because you thought you saw the bad thing you were running away from. But don't think you just stumbled into that shit. You very purposely chose that life too.
Yeah.
And so it was that good balance of like, as much as I love this and I'm really happy with this, if I don't, it can easily become that.
Yeah.
Because that was a choice too. But in hindsight, now I look back and be like, oh, that was shitty. If I'm not careful in this life, I have the full ability to make this life very toxic too, even though it's in a holistic way.
Yeah.
But it was just that funny thing of like, because you just mentioned that, don't think you didn't choose that too, right? And it needed to happen. I needed to have that understanding, that dichotomy, to be able to appreciate this pictorial graph of this Tonga even more, because I very much chose that. And maybe a little more consciousness than I chose the previous life, but now like I'm aware of the choices I've made.
Yeah.
So I'm aware of how important they were to me to make these choices.
Yeah.
So I know the intimacy of like the necessity of keeping those.
Yeah.
Not white knuckling them, like still giving it the ability to grow and to move, but knowing that that's the feeling, that's the idea, that's the concept, of all the things that I'm looking towards, at least at this point in life.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I want to see that visual so bad. What a cool, amazing experience to get to have. It's almost like, the wisdom people have right before they die. You got to have it now. And this is, I think, my experience in life too, as I face death so many times in my own way that it really forced me. No, it didn't force me anything. I chose instead of to give in, right? I chose to begin to live in a way that is conscious. So there's also truth, and I want to bring a lot of compassion to your past self, because there's a very real truth that happens to us where we are born and we are indoctrinated strongly, powerfully into the social conditioning of our caretakers and our society. And many of us are never told that we're allowed to think for ourselves, and we don't know that.
Yeah.
And we live in a way where we follow the rules and we think that life is happening to us and it's our job to be a good boy or a good girl. And otherwise, we will be punished for eternity, or whatever we're taught, right?
Yeah, totally.
And so, did we actually have a choice when we became who we became before we knew that you could choose? I don't think so. And that's why I want to bring a lot of compassion to anyone who's listening to our conversation, and also to you from what you just shared, that we don't know what we don't know until we know it.
Right.
And so when it feels like we're a passenger, it's because we are. We can't create a conscious life from an unconscious place. And many people are living unconsciously, and I don't mean like in a coma, but I mean that they do feel that life is something else is driving. and they are in the passenger seat. And what they're doing is responding to all that life throws at them with reactionary, automated, self-protective responses, because they don't yet have the grounded, confident, soulful knowing that they can actually choose differently. And so before you're at that point, you could be listening to this saying, but you have no idea what's happened to me against my will. And that is the truth. Mm-hmm. A lot of us have been at the effect of things that happen to us against our will. And I never want to brush over the truth of what that does.
Right.
And so even being able to live our lives in a consciously aware way and start to choose differently, like you've so beautifully shared that you've done, is a privilege that comes from having either the breakthrough, the space, the resources, the guidance, the leadership, the life experience, whatever it is that allowed you to open up to a little more awareness to realize, oh, I can choose differently. And I think when we get that, it's a gift. And I don't know that it's guaranteed. And so if someone hasn't had that, I don't think it's their fault.
Right.
And I want to have a lot of compassion for that and just say, like, it's important to know that what you're not changing, you're choosing. But if you're thinking about that in that way already, that means you know it's something you want to change. And that's where radical self-responsibility comes in. Because it's one thing to have no freaking idea. Back when I was an alcoholic, I have compassion for that self. Mm-hmm. She didn't have another tool. And it might have saved my life that I had that tool.
Right.
So once I knew better, and once I knew there was another way, then it comes down to that statement of, okay, am I going to have self-responsibility or not?
Yep, totally.
And not to say it's easy. It's an incredibly bold way to live, to say, I am here to change, evolve, to embrace change. Whew. There is a primal part of us that does not like that.
Right, yeah, definitely. That, the last bag of worms I'm going to open up here real quick is the idea of the shamanic death. Have you ever heard of that?
No, please enlighten me.
Okay, so I see this a lot with people in the healing realms,
Mm-hmm.
Actually in general, but definitely people that have stepped into this kind of healing realm. Mm-hmm. The idea of the shamanic death is that and not saying that you're a shaman, I'm a shaman. I know that's very
Mm-hmm.
indigenous culture, but the idea of the shamanic death is that the shaman will experience multiple versions of what could potentially cause death mm-hmm. or lead to death mm-hmm. so that throughout their life and their training, so that they can better hold space, because like you said, like, you can't experience all of the negativities of life, all of the deaths of life, all of the impacts of life. Mm-hmm. But if we can get a good understanding of what overarching grief feels like, or betrayal feels like, mm-hmm. or being the betrayed one, or mm-hmm. being the one that does the betraying, right? Mm-hmm. Be the victim, be the aggressor. Like, if we can understand what those impacts are in life, it allows us to hold space for somebody else going through something, maybe not exactly, but it's kind of similar too, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, and that can be an understanding of why sometimes, like, we've lived such a fucking hard ass life. Like you said, could have died many a times, right? And there's a beauty in coming out of that, in seeing the light of whatever that means, right?
Absolutely.
Finding your why, finding your yes, finding the whatever reason, right? And
mm-hmm.
and that, I believe, funnels into that idea of the shamanic death, because like you said, like, we can't experience all the negativities, but there's a lot of negativities in the world that we can prepare ourselves for mm-hmm. and hold that space for, right?
Yeah.
And that's having that wherewithal. And it kind of puts some understanding to maybe that troubled past that we've come from, as to, like, because I could look back at my own personal past and be like, yeah, could have died many times, probably should have died many times, probably deserved to die many times.
Same.
But at the same time, like, hindsight 2020, I felt held. I felt
mm-hmm.
safe.
Yes.
I felt like something was kind of keeping an eye on me and be like, you can totally put a full ankle in there, but you can dip a toe in too. See what that toe feels like. That was shit, wasn't it? Yeah, run. You'll learn.
Because your work here isn't done.
Right, totally.
And that's why, You know, and I think about this a lot when I sit with people who have troubled pasts, and there's a lot of regret, a lot of shame, a lot of trauma in that. I want to bring beauty to the darkness that was, because when we give ourselves permission to truly be with the dark and to even crack open, like people talk about rock bottom. What's rock bottom? Well, it's it being in the depth of the darkness, right? You can have a breaking point. People talk about the breakdown, right? This allows us enlightenment. When we are in the worst kind of pain, maybe near death, maybe we have no desire to live, whether it's facing the physical death or like the soul death of like, I don't want to be here anymore, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. It was a lot of that for me. So like whatever our pain points are, being cracked open from the pain of that really makes us open in a really vulnerable way that is not really, you don't get that from going to school and just having an average, like, experience necessarily. Like, right. There's this profound way that the great pain lets a great amount of light in through those cracks. And I think that light is why they call it enlightenment. And that our wisdom, our depth of character, our empathy comes from having lived something hard. And so in that way, it's like, not only can we forgive our story or ourselves and who we were in our past, or whoever it is we need to forgive, or like move on and make a new life, like you said back in the beginning of our conversation, like we aren't starting from scratch. We are always building from the gigantic foundation of everywhere we've already been. So can we just keep making it more beautiful, more right. us, more true? And so it's instead of like, okay, I'm healing from this horrible past, it's how has this past shaped me to be who I am now?
Yes.
And what I know is that the pain in my past has given me deep, deep grooves of empathy for human suffering. And so now I really don't have judgment. I say to my clients all the time, there's nothing that can't be shared in this space. And I mean that.
Yeah. Because
there's nothing that freaks me out. Nothing's too weird. Nothing's too sad. Nothing's too scary. You know what? We are a hot mess. All of us. All of us. And I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. If we were too perfect, if life was too safe, if life was too easy, if we never had stories to tell that would make us feel shame or guilt or regret or fear, I wonder, how would it feel to be the person who's never experienced the shadowy parts of life? How right. would it feel like and again, no judgment if that feels like maybe it's been your life, because one thing that I know is one of my illusions for myself was, you know what? I have a nice family in a nice home, in a nice neighborhood, and I could very easily say that I do not deserve to feel as bad as I feel right now.
Right.
And so you can even have a life that looks pretty perfect on the outside, and you can still go through horrendously difficult things in your inner experience of being alive. And so also it's like everyone's experience is valid.
Right.
Even if we can't comprehend it because we're comparing it to our own. And so whatever your shadows are, like, just know that is making you a more interesting, empathic person with more color to your story. And so it's not even bad.
Yeah.
It is actually what makes a good story. And would you want to read a book that's just about something vanilla?
Right.
Or would you want to read a book that has a kaleidoscope of life experiences?
humans love a good damn story. That's one of the things we love most is a good story.
Yeah, and so if we can look at our own life of, wow, these chapters have been a wild ride. What's the one I'm in right now? I'm the author.
Right? Yeah. Hell yeah. Oh, what a beautiful way to kind of like wrap it all up. You know, it's like you're the author of your own story. You know, where do you want it to go? Mm-hmm. You're on chapter 4 of a 1,000-chapter book. Mm-hmm. You got a lot of life ahead of you. Like, let's write that book.
We can hope. And yet, you know, I'm always just saying this present moment is everything.
I love that.
This moment right now is everything because who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, man, I love this conversation. Well, where can people go to find you? They want to find out more about you.
I would say my preferable way would be Instagram first. Okay. So it's moon.wild.studio. I also do have a website that is a work in progress, has been for quite a long time now. But hey, feel free to visit it and you'll find all of my contact links there. So that's moonwildstudio.com.
Awesome.
And yeah, so thank you so much, Adam, for having me. And yeah, I'd love to hear if anyone has questions or comments or wants to keep this conversation going with us. You know, feel free to hit me up in my DMs. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, most definitely. And we'll leave ways to get in touch with you in the show notes, links to your Instagram and things like that. But
thanks.
Yes, please. And I've mentioned this before on the show, but please, like if somebody offers, they're like, hey, reach out, send an email, share your seemingly strange story.
Yeah.
Please take people up on that. Like it's so important to know that there's help out there from people that you might think are unattainable for whatever reason. You know, there's some beautiful people out there that are willing to like open themselves up to talk to you. So please take advantage of that when people offer it. So Steph, thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
You're so welcome. And thank you too.
Thank you so much for spending time with Stephanie and I. Please check out the show notes for ways to get in touch with Stephanie, to book a session with her, or to find ways to support the show. Obeisance and love. We'll see you next time.